All right, so good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for being here with us. It's good to see we have a lot of SUNY alum and former faculty on the call with us today. Um, we want to take some time today to talk about the Global Commons, which was a project that was done over the summer. So before we begin, just a few things. We will have some time at the end for questions, so we'll look forward to having some more conversation around this at that point. And then just want to take a little bit of time to introduce all of ourselves before we get started. My name is Chilton Reynolds. I'm the interim coordinator of the Teaching, Learning, and Technology Center at SUNY Oneonta, and have been working with the COIL Center for over 7 years now. So I really have enjoyed doing that and look forward to this conversation this morning. So Ed, go ahead.
My name's Ed Beck. I'm an instructional designer and I'm our OER lead for the campus.
Hi everyone, I'm Mary Lou Forward. I'm the executive director of the SUNY COIL Center. COIL stands for Collaborative Online International Learning. We connect classes and students around the world for collaborative projects and discussions.
Hi everybody, I'm Jan McCauley and I am the assistant director at the SUNY COIL Center.
And as you'll see through this presentation, this Global Commons was actually a large project with a lot of people. We're here today from SUNY Oneonta because we helped with a lot of the back-end stuff that we're gonna be able to talk about. And then we're happy to have Mary Lou and Jan join us as they were really the driver of getting this started. So thank you very much. And with that, Ed, I think that's to you.
Yeah, so this slide is trying to be my answer of why does this presentation belong at Open Ed? This was a massive open pedagogy project across the entire system where students were creating work for international partners that would be used by those international partners. It was a good opportunity to highlight some project-based learning. We had students going through a dedicated course on communication and storytelling. And then this was a good example of international learning. And international learning in a time of COVID, international learning during a time that we knew our students couldn't be traveling. And that was the origins of this project.
All right, so from the SUNY COIL Center perspective, this is not necessarily the typical model that we use when we do a COIL project, a COIL collaboration between two classrooms. But in March when COVID hit, the question was raised: how can we help students who, were already abroad for a study abroad program, a mobility-based program, or we're planning on going on a mobility-based program, and how can we kind of adapt the COIL model to be able to, assist those students with having an intercultural experience. So at the foundation of the creation of the Global Commons is really, kind of a carryover of a concept that's very foundational to the COIL model as well, which is to find opportunities for co-equal benefit for all of those involved. So, in a COIL collaboration, we want both groups of students to really have benefit from the exchange. And so in this model, we looked for ways to have students engage with non-governmental and community-based organizations that in a way that would be beneficial for both the students and the entities that they worked with, so within those communities. So that kind of led us to the structure that Ed just mentioned around storytelling and the SDGs, in that we find that often these small CBOs and NGOs lack the resources to effectively communicate the work that they're trying to do. And so we engaged the students in this their ability to tell the story of these organizations. The next slide, Chilton. Okay, so another key piece of this was, and very deliberate feature of the Global Commons, was this idea of unbundling or decoupling the curriculum creation from the facilitation of the actual courses themselves. This gave the students a lot of flexibility in the way that they chose the coursework that they engaged with, but it also allowed facilitators a lot of flexibility in how they kind of guided students through the material. And it's also key to the sustainability and scalability of the program going forward by having all of the content creation done as OER, and have it kind of exist separate from the facilitation. We are now able to kind of repurpose and repackage all of that content for future use in another iteration of the Global Commons, and also for other kinds of projects as well. As Chilton mentioned, on the next slide, you'll see, as was mentioned, this was a very large system-wide project, and the State University of New York system includes 64 campuses. So it's a large university system. Not all of those campuses participated, but as you can see, 22 of them were actively involved in some way in the creation and implementation of the Global Commons, as well as 5 system offices from SUNY Online to the Office of Global Affairs and others. So it really was a large scale effort by the system to really create something new and innovative around these open educational models. Mary Lou.
Great, thanks. So to get into the model a little more specifically, the course, we knew that the program also needed to be credit bearing. And so we conceptualized it as 2 courses, 2 separate courses that were 3 credits each. We wanted students to get both the breadth of the course content, but we also wanted them to be able to focus in on something through depth. So we used that by providing choice to students. The intercultural storytelling course for global sustainability was the first course that was offered. It offered in common across all of the different iterations of that principles of storytelling. So students had that in common. And then they got to select what they would look at through a choice of medium. So they would choose, for example, podcasting, or they chose theater, or they chose another expression of storytelling to get into depth what that looks like. The same model we used for the sustainable development courses, international perspectives on one of 6 selected sustainable development goals, which you can see across the bottom. They got an overview of that SDG so they could understand the complexity of what these SDGs are trying to frame. And then we called them lenses. It was an opportunity for students to explore in depth an issue within that SDG. Next slide, please. So to give you an example of what that looked like in real time, this program ran from the beginning of July until the middle of August. And the first couple of weeks was focusing on getting students ready for intercultural communications and also intercultural storytelling. So in this example, we use a student, Sarah, who decided to look at storytelling through the graphic novel medium. So she got the breadth and the principles of storytelling, and then she explored what storytelling looked like through a graphic novel medium. And then she followed that up in the next couple of weeks with looking at an international perspective on one of the Sustainable Development Goals. In our example here, she chose climate action, which is SDG 13. She got the overview to understand the complexity of climate action around the world. And then she decided to focus her project with her group on creating a graphic novel in full collaboration with the NGO partner. In this case, it was the Friends of Brackenhurst Forest, which is a community-based organization that just started about 6 months ago. And so this organization really needed help communicating their story out to their community and also to potential donors. And this graphic novel then was one of the ways that this organization could communicate that out. The final week of the program then was a wrap up of this, her presentation of the novel to the NGO partner, and also feedback from her group and feedback from her professors. Students also got together for one final collaboration all together. Every student who went through this program, the final day of the program, we got together for a celebration where students presented their work to each other and talked about this experience. Next slide, please. So this is the graphic novel that this student actually presented. In 2 weeks, she conceptualized with her peers, and of course with full collaboration of the NGO partner. She conceptualized what that novel would look like, developed the story, and illustrated it. And this is available now, as Ed will show, to anybody. Next slide. So in the wider perspective, within the choices that we built into this model, the storytelling courses, students got to choose from 6 medium that they got to explore in depth. They also had 6 NGOs that they, 6 SDGs that they could pick. And then they worked with the NGO partners. The NGO partners were tied to the SDG. So everyone who chose climate action worked with the Friends of Brackenhurst Forest, but they were able to do more than one project. So students were able to break into smaller groups. We saw the graphic novel as an example. Another group worked on a video for that particular NGO. So not everybody went through the same pathway, but everybody did do a project and got some choice in what they were doing. Okay, over to Ed.
Before I get into the open pedagogy a little bit, I just want to say there was a huge team that worked on this, and we're just the ones that got to come to Open Ed to present it to you. But this project doesn't happen without Mary Lou and Jan's work. They wrangled an entire system to put this together, and many of you said you're alumni or know the SUNY system, so you know that that's no small feat. So if we're presenting this as an open pedagogy project, and we are, I'm using the definition that David Wiley and John Hilton put together, which they called OER enabled pedagogy. Are our students being asked to create something new? Yeah, they're going to make a video. They're going to make a storybook. They're going to make a graphic novel. Does it have value beyond just learning? Oh yeah. These are actually going to be used by the organizations they're paired with to help them as they continue their messaging and help reach a broader audience. We had a celebration for those students where they were able to share those publicly, and we had the SUNY Chancellor invite there. We had an event for them to show them, and now they're proudly displayed on our Global Commons website, so that they know that they're getting out there and other people are seeing them. And then those were all licensed CC BY, so that we could have them used for whatever purpose by those organizations, and those organizations have the permissions if they like to keep working on them, tweaking them, editing them, as well as anyone else. And we're just really proud of the great work that they did. So at SUNY Oneonta, we kind of spearheaded a domain of one's own initiative, and we thought that this was a perfect project to host on our SUNY Create project. So we created globalcommons.sunycreate.cloud. And here, I just wanted to point out that this is what the students had to do. When they came to the website, there's a big share button in the top right corner, or you can see right at the bottom of it, says share your project. And when they clicked on that, they authenticated with their own SUNY credentials. Chilton, you go to the next slide. Just log in with your SUNY credentials. We're using the SUNY single sign-on, and it creates the account for them, and then they can get ready just to share their work. And we did this right through WordPress, if you go to the next slide. And they were able to use that new WordPress block editor to create a website for those that had never had that opportunity before, and they're showing off this is the work they did. Those sites would then go into a queue to be released by our admins that were working on it. And so people like Chilton would go in and say, okay, this is ready to post to the public. This is ready to post publicly on the internet. And so this is there. And if we show the next slide, we organize these right by the SDG that they were working on, and we have all these examples of our student projects proudly displayed on our Global Commons website.
So before we actually jump to the website, and we do want to show that to you and let you have a chance to look around, I did want to take just a second to kind of talk about how we prepared our students to do this. This was a global experience for them, as Janet said at the very beginning. We wanted our students to really be prepared to interact with a international partner. So that started with the facilitators that we chose to do this. So this facilitator process really looked for faculty across SUNY that were either had international experience or had a connection with the NGOs that we ended up working with. This is just a couple of the facilitators that we are screenshotting from the website to be able to talk about how we to show you some of the faculty that did this. But we really wanted to make sure that we had faculty in place and prepared the students to do this. So as they went through the storytelling conversation and the content of that, we really focused on an intercultural perspective inside of that. We really took a lot of time to prepare the students in a couple of different ways. And so we created a couple of different things in Powtoons, animated videos that kind of showed this process of how they were going to work with their faculty and how they were going to work with their NGO partners so that they had a chance to process through what they were doing inside of this. So just wanted to kind of say that was the situation of how we got the students ready to do this. And then from there, and actually come back to these in just a second, because I do want to get to the website. We actually then wanted to kind of show off the website itself. This is it. I'll put this into the chat so that if you want to take a look yourself, you can.
I already did.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. See, you're a step ahead of me. Thank you. As Ed said before, the share button right up here is where students went to be able to get to this. But then we have everything divided by the projects over here. And so I'm sorry, by the SDGs. So you could go and actually see specific projects inside of here. As we said before, they are all openly licensed so that both the NGOs were able to use them as they needed to, and so that we could share them here as well. And I'll echo what Ed said before. We really liked the backbone of this structure of basing it off of domain of one's own, because it gave us a lot of flexibility with both adding things here. This is a living thing. We are continuing to work on it. We have some of the developers up here, as well as some of the partners and some of the program facilitators. We're going to be adding to this. This is not everybody at the moment. We're going to continue to add to this. A couple things that aren't here yet that I think we want to add are we're starting to collect student reflections from individual students. The reflections that they did initially were inside of the course, and so we're now reaching out to them to see if they'd be willing to share those more openly. And so that's kind of one of the next steps on this. The other thing that we are going to aim to put here is the actual content of the courses. That's not out here yet, but since it was openly licensed, we want to be able to share that out. So those are two of the things that are coming. Ed, I don't know if you want to add anything first, and then get to Jan and Mary Lou to see if there's anything else they wanted to add.
Nope, you're doing a great job.
Okay. Mary Lou and Jan, are you good?
Yep, I think so.
Okay.
We're doing
All
great.
right. So yeah, so some of those next steps are we want to get the OER the content here to get them shared as widely as possible. Part of that is the best format. So that's kind of the conversations we're having at the moment is what format we want to post it here. As you can see, this is a complex curriculum that has been created. It's not linear. I call it the choose your own adventure to some extent. As a child of the 80s and growing up on choose your own adventure books, there's a lot of that in here. So it's not just a linear, we can just put the curriculum straight down, and we want to figure out how we can best put that into here. So those are the next steps and what's going to be coming to this. So anybody else from the presenters want to add anything else before we open this up for questions? All right, then we'll open this up to some questions. I
see Sue has a question. She said, how do you connect with your abroad partners?
And Mary Lou, I don't know if you want to, you were very instrumental in that part of that.
Sure. So for this, particularly for the pilot phase, we wanted to make sure that these were partners that would trust us in particular, because as Jan said, it's really important to us that these are seen as equal partnerships. And so we put the call out throughout the SUNY system for people to nominate partners that they knew of, so that there would be some previous connection with those partners. And then once those nominations came in, we went through to see what the goodness of fit would be with the courses and the SDGs that we had selected. And then we, as the steering committee, reached out to each of the NGOs, let them know more information about what was happening. We had some calls with them. We had a lot of email communication to kind of refine their expectations. And once everybody was satisfied, we partnered them right up with the faculty, who then were in touch with the NGOs to also further refine those expectations.
We had a question from Veronica, and she said, of the whole body of students who completed the project, how many chose to openly license or share their finished project? And I think what we did in this project was we gave them the option. We said these are all going to be public, And we gave them the option of anonymizing themselves if they didn't want to be associated with the final project, because it was a group project and it was done by many people together.
But we really wanted the NGOs to be able to use those projects in whatever ways they needed to going forward. So all of the finished projects were openly licensed. And
I believe, if I'm correct, that was said at the very beginning as they registered
was,
for
yeah.
the course. So it was not something that was brought onto them at the end. That was right from the very beginning, was let them know that the projects had to be openly licensed. Just as we're talking and answering questions, I'm having some quotes up on the screen. There's 3 slides of this, so I'll move through these kind of slowly so you can read some of these. But these are different feedback that came from different areas. So this was from some of the students on lessons learned inside of one of the SDGs. We can continue asking questions. I'll just kind of slide through these as we continue. Other questions?
It was kind of a rough week at work, and going through the slides last night and getting ready for this presentation, it was really nice to read these student testimonials and these student quotes. It perked me up.
Oops, sorry about that. There's another question about how study abroad credit works across disciplines. And Jan or Mary Lou, if you want to answer that one, because I think you had to do the deeper dive into that than we did.
Sure. So within the SUNY system, we have a consortium-based kind of model for study abroad credits. So it's a little bit complicated, but it's fairly well defined that those credits can be issued by one campus and can kind of transfer over to different areas. So students can take the syllabus, and it will demonstrate what they studied, and they can petition for credit in their particular disciplines, or they can be applied as general education credits on their home campus. So it's a little bit of a process, but it's kind of the tried and true model of the SUNY Study Abroad Consortium. So that was the model that we took to be able to give the students the greatest flexibility in those areas, and to be able to get the credits that they needed pretty quickly. Oh, here's a good question.
Yeah. Yeah.
What would we do
Veronica,
differently?
Yeah. What would we do differently? So who wants to? We have gone through a retrospective recently, and are kind of finishing out the report on that currently. So I don't know, Mary Lou or Jane, if you want to talk to that.
The number one thing we would do differently is start earlier. We pulled this entire program together, as Chilton mentioned, no small feat to do across a complex system as large as SUNY. We put this together from conception to fully enrolled and going in 10 weeks. So because of that, we had to make a lot of very quick decisions that in some ways that helped us. We were a bit like a snowplow, and we said, okay, if you can't help us, we're just going to keep going and plow right through. But I think we would be able to be more thoughtful with more time. And so we are already starting our planning process for next summer.
And the other question Veronica had was, what advice would you have for those starting to bridge the gap between an open education project on a small scale and one for the public good, especially for those folks that don't have the same team of support?
Yeah, I think that we can learn a lot looking at the frameworks of project-based learning, looking at the kinds of things. When I was still teaching, I got trained by the Buck Institute and their particular brand of project-based learning. If anyone wants to Google that, that's a good resource on project-based learning. Buck Institute, B-U-C-K, and what they're asking students to do is an authentic assignment, something that has use already. And I think sometimes when we think about open pedagogy, sometimes because we're so textbook focused, we think, oh, I'm going to write a textbook, or oh, I'm going to make ancillaries to a textbook. And I think that the COIL process that Jan was really did a great job of describing the starting question was not how do we create resources, it was how do we do good for both parties? How do we bring a benefit both for the students and for the group? And so Jan, maybe you want to answer this question.
So I mean, I think that I think that's really at the heart of it is, you know, trying to find ways to make it beneficial for everyone. And so kind of, you know, even if you don't know that you have the same team of support, you probably have people who have these connections around you and things like that. So, you know, starting by looking at the organizations that might be connected to your campus and your institution already, and you know, there are often professors everywhere who are doing this kind of work on small scales that can, you know, and that can be kind of expanded upon. So I would say, you know, doing some initial outreach to be able to find those connections is probably step one.
And I would also put in, this doesn't, although we chose to do this as an international project, it can equally be done as a domestic project. So there are lots of community-based organizations in all of our communities who could use support in communications and getting their messages out. And with good planning and good connections locally, you can make a difference for those organizations.
So I think we're at time now. If that's right, Rachel. So we'll stop. But these are our email addresses. We'd be happy to talk more about this, both from the domain of one's own end of it or the whole project as a whole. But thank you very much for the time. We appreciate it, and we'll be happy to stick around. We will be sharing out the presentation. We have a link to the presentation that we can share out on that. And just thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much to our presenters. I'm going to stop the recording.